graduated, elevated. Now it's my time to shine, yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves, take it to the top one time non-stop. Graduated.
Hello and welcome to PhD Hardtalk. Thank you so much for your time today. Could you please introduce yourself, your research, university, and then we'll take you from there.
Hi, I'm Elena. Thank you so much for having me. It was actually great for me to reach out to you and be like, can I be on here? So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So my background is in psychology, particularly social psychology. So I specialize in individual differences, personality, and behavioral outcomes, in particular prejudice and aggression. And my research is a cross-cultural comparative study of Russia and United Kingdom in relation to personality and behavioral outcomes of prejudice and aggression. So kind of in simpler terms, it is basically looking at how Russia and United Kingdom differs on the aspects of relationship between personality and behavior. So that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, I love that, because I feel in society, we don't really focus on behavior and conduct, and yet it plays a big, I'll use the word big, role in everything we do, be it study, supervisor relationship, employee-employer relationship, even getting on a tram or a train or a plane. And you can get banned, nowadays, or going to a football game. So I think it's quite exciting. So I can't wait to for us to start and really get into it. But first things first, what made you want to research this topic? What intrigued you?
I was always fascinated with understanding why people do certain things. And in particularly nowadays, if you think about it, prejudice and aggression, things that should not be happening, but they still are. And I always questioned, why is that still happening? Is there something to do with our environment? Is there something to do with our history? Is there something to do directly with us? Is this our personality? Is that how we developed evolutionary? And it just always fascinated me on that topic. So I kind of decided to look at one angle in particular, and I took personality as it, because obviously I studied social psychology before in anthropology. So I thought what's kind of the best way to combine all of it. Obviously, personality, individual differences. So it's like, for me, it was like a natural progression from all the questioning that I've done in the past to where I am now. And honestly, the things that I found in my PhD and the things that I found in my research were just, for me, I don't know if for everyone else, but for me, they were absolutely groundbreaking. It's like, I wrote about evolutionary understanding of aggression and how back in the day, it was something to help us stay safe and to help people kind of stay safe from between different tribes. But now it should have been wear off, but it's still there. Is it because we're under threat? Are we still kind of feel that we are not safe? And it's similarly with prejudice. Are we fighting for resources? Is there not enough resources in the world? Is there something within our society keeps telling us that two groups can't coexist in complete peace? So that's kind of, for me, was the premises, I would say, for my PhD. And that's how I got interested in the subject.
Thank you so much for explaining. So definitions, as we know in research, you can play around with definitions, and words go through amelioration, pejoration, you can converge, all that stuff. So for your research then, when you talk about personality, what is the definition that you use for your research?
So for my research, there's so many definitions of personality, especially if you go between different subjects. But for me personally, I used a collection of traits. In particular, I used the Dark Triad, which is the darker personality, and the Big Five, which is the main personality traits. And it's kind of the main theory of personality. So if you look at a lot of personality tests that are out there, they're based on the Big Five. So it's things like extraversion, conscientiousness, openness to experience, negative emotionality, that type of thing. And the Dark Triad, of course, is something I think we all possess to a certain extent. It's like the darker personality qualities, so psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism. And it is fascinating. I find this was kind of my definition of personality in my PhD.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying. So still on definitions, going to aggression, I think you said evolutionary aggression. What is the definition of that? Because then it will help us, I think, with the rest of the discussion for everybody to understand for your research.
Yeah, of course. So evolutionary aggression is something that we hold on from the past, and a lot of things, like I said, supposed to be wearing off. We're not under threat technically. Our society and individuals are not under threat, but aggression is an intent to harm another, and with the premises of that person being under threat, if that makes sense. So that was kind of my definition. But again, aggression is one of those things that has so many variations of definitions, and it when it comes, I think, to social psychology, it's like you can define it in one way and someone would agree with you, but about 90% of people would disagree with you. So it's like, honestly, it is ridiculous. It's like there's so many definitions for those things.
Yes. No, I understand that. And I guess, you know, the aim here is once we understand the definition that you've chosen for your research, it's easier for us to understand rather than challenge. As you know, at this moment in time, take me, for example, someone might see me as an influencer. I don't see myself as an influencer. And if I talk about mental health and I say, oh, having mango in the morning and, you know, maybe water, then it becomes a thing. And then someone looks for a theory and is like, oh, yeah, she's right. So, or maybe they say, no, she's wrong. So basically, it's just for us to build the picture to understand your research a bit better. So now going back to the comparison, which you've said is the UK, and we've got, I say this wrong every time and everyone laughs at me, Russia. I think is that right? So what made you choose those two countries? Because they're quite different.
Yeah, they're very different. And I'm glad actually you said that, because not everyone agrees with me that Russia and the UK are different on the cultural and kind of societal level, which is really strange. But I'm originally from Russia, you see, and I've been in the UK for 12 and a half years now. So I came here to do my A-levels, I did my university, and kind of now I'm doing my PhD. Russia is something that has been opposed in the UK for a very long time, since like Cold War, pretty much since the end of World War II. And I see Russia as not a Western example of a Western country. Does that make sense?
I agree.
Yeah,
if you look at Russia with Ukraine, that shows you what's going on there.
Yeah, but what you have to bear in mind as well is like when you look at Russia, you see that representation of Putin, you see that in the media it's constantly being portrayed as something negative, something not Western, something anti-democratic. You constantly see those things in the articles, but actually when you take a deep dive into the Russia, people don't want the war. No one in Russia actually wants this apart from the government. So that's quite of an interesting thing that's not really as portrayed in the media. But I think it happens all the time. Like we only see that tiny aspect of a country being portrayed in the media in the West. We don't actually see anything else, because unless you do your own deep dive into it, and unless you understand it, and unless you kind of start researching it, not many people have time to do this unless you get paid to do this, like I do.
That's what
Exactly.
So, you know, you've touched on something really, really important there. And I guess when we look at the culture, because you said you've lived there and you've then relocated to the UK, so relocated or migrated, and you know the culture there. So for the people at home, so that they understand, what is the culture like? Because I know religion's a big thing, and you know in Russia, and how you live your life is mainly influenced by religion. If I'm wrong, please correct me, but I think that's what I've read on the internet. So you can take it from there.
That's actually really interesting, because it is true to an extent, but like every 21st century country, there is things, there is atheist, there is Orthodox, there is Christian, but the primary kind of background of Russian people is Orthodox. I count myself as an agnostic, so I don't kind of particularly believe in God, but I believe there's something out there. Even though as a person of science, it sounds probably ridiculous, but I tend to want to believe, I think, more than anything.
Yeah.
Whereas my parents are quite religious. They go to church on Sundays, and they kind of put candles and things like that. And I grew up in, I wouldn't say a very religious household, but a household where religion was respected as someone's choice. So it's kind of hard for me to say that all Russia is religious, but I think quite a lot of Russia is, because church has been a big influence in Russian history from pretty much the days Russia was created. Church was massive, like a huge influence. It was influencing the kings. It was influencing up until the break, pretty much up until the Soviet Union. Russia was influencing, church was influencing a lot of things in Russia. And then obviously with the rise of the Soviet Union, it was seen as not a socialist way. So it was seen not something that's appropriate for people, and it was kind of jeopardized, if that makes sense. But I have no kind of opinion on religion. It's such a personal choice. So seeing all Russian people are religious, I wouldn't go well, but I would definitely say has influenced the understanding of Russian culture.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get to say it has influence, because just from what I've read anyway, but it's not the core foundation, but it has influence in terms of day to day. So going back to your research, then you're comparing these two beautiful countries. What are your key findings that you think, this is interesting and you would like to do further research into those key bits of information?
That's a good question. That's actually, I'll just put it out there. This is really preparing me for my Viva month. So I'm loving this. This is exactly what I need. It's like my mock Viva. This is great. So I think in terms of my biggest findings, the one I think would influence the most and has the future to do a lot of further research is that Russian people tend to see agreeableness as submissiveness, and it tends to be seen as a negative trait rather than a positive trait, which took me a while to understand. I pretty much banged my hand against the wall for days and months when I had my correlations up there, because I couldn't understand how can Dark Triad be positively, so how could conscientiousness, I think it was, and agreeableness be positively correlated with the Dark Triad with the presence of the mediator. It just baffled me because it's never been seen in the literature. And the more I dug up, the more I tried to understand it, the more I realized that actually it's seen as submissiveness. Obviously, I named it submissiveness. It's just seen as something negative and something that person tend to be too agreeableness, non-confrontational. But I called it submissiveness. So I think that was one of my biggest findings that needs a lot more work put into it in the future. The other thing,
ask a question, in terms of that. So if that's seen as, a submission in terms of your research, let's think of a boardroom. If everybody's agreeing, isn't that seen as a weakness? If that was the case, if we're to take your research finding and put it in a boardroom, we'll take Tesla. And they're having a conversation. They're like, we've just bought this factory in Germany. Things aren't working. We need to, this is the time. Let's fold everything and, file for liquidation. And everybody's like, yes, yes, yes. But Elon Musk is there going, no, but I'm an engineer. I think we can still mix A, B and get it done. And everybody says, yes, let's call it a day. Thank you very much. Wouldn't that be seen as a weakness then for him? Because it is his brand and he's worked really, really hard in terms of that context.
I think I know what you mean, but you see, in the West, agreeableness is seen as a positive thing because you tend to be a non-confrontational person. You tend to be easygoing. And don't get me wrong, everyone loves an easygoing person because you don't tend to argue with them. You don't tend to have difficult conversation. Don't have to have that awkward silence, So agreeableness is something that's been seen so positive. But yes, you're completely right. In the context of, let's say, a political situation or in the concept of a business situation, you need to have a backbone. You need to be able to stand up for your values, and you need to be able to stand up for things that you do and you love or are passionate about. So I think it depends which context you take. Because I evaluated general population, for me, this is what I found. But I think if I evaluated political population, say political leaders or business leaders, I'll find something completely different, because I think on all levels, business leaders have the same tendencies. If that makes sense. So they have very similar, not the same, similar tendencies. And I think agreeableness would be one of those. The best CEOs that history has seen tend to be not agreeable. They tend to be actually quite vocal and tend to stand up for their ideas and tend to kind of believe in what they do, even though hundreds and thousands and sometimes millions of people completely disagree with them. So I think in that context, yes, but in the context of general population, agreeableness is a positive trait in the West, but a negative trait in Russia. But I also think it depended on Russian history, because I think you're seen as very agreeable. I think you tend to kind of just follow the crowd in Russia, whereas at the moment with the political climate and the fact that a lot of young people, even older generation, are standing up to the government and kind of repression that's happening in the country, I think being agreeable is not what they need right now. They need to have that. They need to have that kind of verge of standing up for themselves and standing up to the government. So I think that's what they need right now. But I think in the context of peace and kind of if we had a very calm, perfect climate, I think everyone would be agreeable. But yeah, I hope that answers this. Sorry, it's like a really long-winding way of answering this.
No, it does, because it's dependent on context, and I understand. So in terms of the audience then, whom are you writing for? Are you writing for people in the UK, or are you writing to policy writers? Who's the audience?
Yeah, that's a hard question. Honestly, probably scientific audience, probably psychologists, really. But if you asked me that a few years ago, I would say, oh my God, yeah, definitely. I'm writing it for the people. I want people to understand my research. But then the more I do it, I think the more I understand that actually this is for like a scientific audience, is for people who actually will take my research further, and for hopefully for even students who take on psychology and interested in the subject will take my research further. So I think that's who is it for. But if you ask me that about my master's dissertation, oh, that was 100% for the people. God, I wrote. It was a hardcore dissertation. It was everything that was happening in Russia at the time, and it was quite a difficult situation for my family as well. And I took it out on my dissertation. I'll tell you that. I wrote so much political context in that, and even my husband was like, "Ooh, gotta be careful publishing that in Russia." I was like, "Okay,
we won't be able to go back home."
It was honestly, it was so funny. But I think we get influenced by our research quite a bit. But this time around, I think I more and more realized that this has to be for an audience that can take my research further. So it's psychologists, future psychologists, and probably students.
So that, in a way, what you're saying is you found a research gap and you'd like to carry it forward, which is brilliant. So guys, get those scholarships. You had the title. And apply.
Please do. And contact me and cite me in the reference as well.
So in terms of then we've gone through the personalities and what you found. How does the community to which you've said your master's, that was genuinely, for the politicians and the community to get the awareness. Right now, how does your research benefit the wider community in the UK, because we're going to read it, and also back home?
I think the biggest benefit of my project was the fact that I'm showing people that there are cultural differences, and people need to take that into account when they make judgments about people. And I think that's what's important. I think that's what's missing from a lot of psychology research, is the fact that they do not take culture into account. They see it's more and more now, but it wasn't even 5 years ago. It was cross-cultural psychology is something that needs to be taken into account, because we're living in a multicultural world. It is multicultural. Things like we can go and eat sushi. I know it's obviously wouldn't be exactly the same sushi as in Japan, but we still can go and try it. But we still can try those things. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's important. I think taking culture into account when you do your research is something that I've been kind of banging on for the past 4 years, almost 4 years. And I think I never used to take culture as seriously as I do now, but it is that it has to be taken into account. You can't judge different people based on your understanding of what your culture is. You have to judge them based on understanding of their culture. And I think that is a massive takeaway from my PhD. You need to see that culture. You need to understand people from their cultural perspective, and then you can judge them on that, rather than just kind of see it from a westernized perspective and be like, oh yeah, the West is completely correct, and this is how we're going to judge the rest of the world, so to speak.
Okay, so you've touched on the word culture, and I believe culture to different people means different things. So in this instance, when we look at your home country, which is Russia, how would you define culture for that country specifically? Because we know that it's unique and is wonderfully made in that sense. Same as the UK, is quite unique and complex and wonderfully made. And so therefore, when we define culture to the UK, I know that it would be quite challenging to have an answer. But then I've never lived in Russia, so I don't know what the culture's like there. And I think the audience would love to know.
You are I couldn't agree with you more. You're 100% correct. The fact that defining a country's culture is a very difficult thing to do, because like UK, Russia was influenced by so many things. We have the East neighbors, obviously the China, Mongolia, Korea, Japan, all of that influences Russia. Then they have the West neighbors, which is the Finland, the Baltic countries, which influence Russia from this perspective. And then we have the Siberia, which is completely different. And it is populated, obviously not as densely populated, but it is populated, and people have completely different culture there. My mom, for example, she was from down south in Russia, and her and my dad, both academics, but they have completely different understanding of a culture, if that makes sense, because my dad is not a social kind of academic. He is an engineer and advanced mathematician, whereas my mom is a ecological lawyer. So she has completely different understanding of culture. And when I've been trying to explain to them what I actually do, they're like, but how can you define it? Like, you can't, there's no a unified definition. And I agree with that. There isn't a unified definition. I think definition of culture is such a personal thing. Again, it depends. My culture, for example, will be influenced by the fact that I lived 17 years in Russia, and then up until now, for 12 and a half years, I've been living in the UK. And that would my culture be defined by two countries mixed together, rather than by, oh yeah, I am British, because I'm not. I am Russian, but I understand the British culture and I love British culture, if that makes sense. So I think I wouldn't give you a definition, because I don't know it. Personally, I couldn't define Russia in a single definition. I think it's influenced by so many things. The same question actually when I get asked, oh, so what's traditional Russian food? And I'm like, actually, it is a mixture of a lot of things. Like borscht, which is so famous in Russia, is actually Ukrainian. And but it is famous in Russia. It's huge. You eat it everywhere and you love it. My mom makes it fantastically. But it is Ukrainian at the origins. And this is what fascinates me. It's like Russia has been on that multicultural path since the beginning, because we've been so influenced by so many kind of neighbors from different countries. So we can't say, 100% like Russian culture is this and that. But it's not. It's just a mixture of things that has been influenced since the dawn of Russia. So that would be my definition, probably, more or less.
No, quite interesting. And I like the fact that you didn't box the country and give it a definition, a solid definition. So thank you for that, because I think it makes our lives difficult in that sense when we travel around the world, because people have this uniform answer and you're sat there going, I have no idea what you're saying. That's just not me. And, just to preserve the conversation and not to be rude, going back to your traits, you just go, yes, that's true. But you're thinking in your head, no, this is not it. So thank you very much for that. So going back to culture, I think the other part that we need to touch on is tribes and clans, in the sense of they influence culture, and it links into personalities. and it links into some of the hate or aggression that we may have. So could you touch on that? Because I think that's quite important, just to, you know, from your background, just to touch on that in terms of what it is, and whether it is a thing or I've just made it up. If it is, that's all right, we'll edit it out. But if it is true and is valid, then we can discuss.
Well, it is 100% valid. I'll tell you this, history is valid. It influences us from everything that we do, from the way we grow up to our behavior. It is valid. We have to understand our history. We can't just kind of shove it to the side and forget about it. We have to know it. We have to learn from our mistakes, and we have to progress. And that's how I see it. And understanding of tribal culture, it is so different. Every tribe is absolutely different. You used to have, like, for example, shamanic tribes. Yeah, they are fascinating. I actually wrote my my BA dissertation, so my anthropology degree, on shamanic tribe and understanding shamanic tribe in 21st century. And it is so different. We're moving towards having, instead of having that traditional shamanic understanding, to something a bit more modern. And that's who I interviewed. I interviewed modern shamans, and who kind of take the preservation of a culture but move it to 21st century. And I think understanding tribal culture is so important. It's like, at the end of the day, we're all the same. We all come from exactly the same place. We're all exactly the same. And what needs to be understood, I think having that kind of fight over resources or fight over definition and trying to box us all into certain categories, I think it's not what we're all about now. I think because we're living in a multicultural society, we need to embrace that and embrace the multiculturalism, but respect our history and respect our past. And I think that's what it should be. So I think for me, tribal culture is so interesting. I would personally love to study it a lot more. And I would love to study, for example, personality within the tribal culture and how that influences them. Because
that's a research paper, people.
Yeah, exactly. Please reach out to me and we'll do the research together, because I love it. No, but it would be fascinating to study different tribes across the world and see how they differ, and see how they understand each other, see how they communicate, and see their differences in their personality, and even things like see the difference in their definition of aggression, because my definition of aggression would be very westernized, whereas their definition of aggression could be completely different. So that's what it would be fascinating. But obviously I haven't done it. So thank you for pointing out flaws in my research for that. Love it. Thank you.
We are practicing for your Viva, so hey.
Okay.
That's it. No, you know, I agree with you when it comes to tribes, because if we were to break it down in this moment in time, and we took Wales, we took the UK, we took Scotland, and then we put a versus island, both islands, I swear, I think you will have so many papers come out of that. And so many topics that will be so fascinating, because going back to the world of the word culture, we're so unique and we're so different. And, you know, going back to history as well, the tribes that, you know, our forefathers belong to, we still have a little bit of that, and it influences how we think, what we eat, and behaviors. And when we protect ourselves, because that's what we've known, you know, before we were born, that's our thing. And therefore, I think it would be amazing. So please get in contact. The details at the bottom. I would participate too.
But even kind of on that subject, even if you look at the COVID rules, how different the COVID rules in each country, and how late, for example, England was implementing this, and Scotland was the first, and then Wales did this, and how we're all different in that. And it's actually coming from the fact that we are different. Yes, we are a unified country, but we are different because we come from completely different backgrounds. And I find that fascinating. It actually relates to everything that we do in life, and it honestly is something I would love to carry on studying.
Amazing. I'm loving that. So let's discuss your methodology. Right. What's your chosen methodology and why?
So my chosen methodology was actually a cross-sectional design with a correlation-based method of analysis. So what I done was obviously take my population at one time and kind of cut it and said, this is the population I'm studying, and this is what cross-sectional design is. And I looked at Russia and United Kingdom at one point in time. And then basically what I've done for study 2 and 3, repeated exactly the same thing. Altogether, I had 3 studies. They were all kind of on the same premises. So my first study was understanding the relationship between the personality traits first, so between the Big 5 and the Dark Triad in a cross-cultural setting, and then kind of use that to inform the baseline of study 2 and 3, which study 2 was focus of the relationship between personality trait and prejudice, and then study 3 was personality traits and aggression. So that's kind of the outlook of my kind of methodology. And in terms of analysis, I used correlational-based method of analysis. So I can't establish cause and effect, which everyone's going to bang on about. But I can tell you there is a strong, for example, positive correlations between certain traits and behaviors. But I can't say whether it is a one-way street or two-way street, or if there's other factors influencing it, basically.
So if I am hearing you right now, cross-sectional, I'm thinking, what is it and how does it actually benefit your research, and how did you get to that point?
So my supervisor is specialist in the cross-sectional design. But what he told me is that for cross-cultural studies, you can either do 2 things. You can either do cross-sectional design or you can do longitudinal analysis.
Yes.
And longitudinal studies are very expensive, very time-consuming, and 3 years is, well, in my perspective, it wouldn't be enough. Plus, it wouldn't be 3 years. It would be literally about a year between the time I had to collect the data and the time I had to do the analysis. So that's kind of why cross-sectional design.
Okay.
Yes, it's actually part of my limitations of my study, is that I do suggest to do a longitudinal study next time, especially on this subject, and to kind of understand whether there are changes over time. But it needs to be a long period of time. It can't be just a month. It needs to be at least a year, hopefully probably even 2 years, to fully understand if those are changes between the relationship between personality traits and kind of behavioral outcomes over a long period of time. So but that's why cross-sectional.
Thank you. So in terms of your research, this is the final question, when it comes to your research, do you feel like your emotions and heritage influenced you in terms of what you did right from your literature review all the way to when you were looking at the data? Or do you feel you were rather objective and pragmatic at that point? Or did you find yourself sometimes being a bit swayed?
I would love for a person to be seriously like 100% pragmatic and objective 24/7. I would love for someone to point that person out to me, and I would learn from that person. And I think everyone should. But
we should call.
We should call. Please reach out if you're 100% objective 24/7 in your life. Please reach out, and if you're a researcher, I'm here for it.
We are here.
Yeah, honestly, but I can't say I am, because I am Russian at the end of the day. I love my culture and I do love Russia. I don't encourage the political situation. I completely don't stand for it. But I love my family. I love where I come from. I love my background. I love people of Russia. But at the same time, I love people in the UK. I love UK culture. I love everything about UK, apart from politics. But we're not going to go there. It is something I can't be constantly objective about. If I did maybe a qualitative study, I would try to be as objective as I could possibly be. But because I did quantitative study, my numbers speak for me. So there's certain thing I can't not explain and use my feelings to explain it, because there are numbers. If it is a positive correlation between agreeableness and the Dark Triad, it is a positive correlation. I can't physically do anything about it. If that makes sense. I can't kind of put my feelings into it and say, oh, but it's all good. Russian people are so lovely. Because it's not how it works. It is a number and it shows me that. Whereas if I did qualitative study, maybe, I would have been, definitely objectivity would have been something on my mind constantly, because you can't get your feelings involved when you do a qualitative study. It's much, much harder. in that sense. So I think I did try to be as objective, as pragmatic as I could possibly be, but I wouldn't say I was 24/7.
No, I love your answer, and thank you very much. So we've received a few questions that have been sent in, just asking me to answer. So okay. I will ask you this question. Do you feel fulfilled when you publish an article, a journal article?
Fulfilled?
Yeah.
Honestly, yes. I suppose, yes. I absolutely love doing
articles.
Yeah,
I would do.
Don't get me wrong. Honestly, it's like a champagne opening in the background every time I publish an article. Because any article you get published, it's like, my name is out there. I'm getting my name out there. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the constant pressure of peer review is that what gets to me. It's I hate the fact that I am so open to the idea of my work being reviewed and being criticized, but as long as it's a constructive criticism. A lot of things out there are not constructive criticism. People think that they have kind of not the right, but constantly judge your work without having actually give you a constructive criticism. And that's what really bothers me about academia. Everyone has an opinion. You literally put one thing out there and about 100 people come back with 100 different opinions. And you're like, oh my God, why did I put that thing out there? Mm-hmm. But I do feel fulfilled when I published an article. I just wish it was more of if it was a criticism, I want it to be a constructive criticism, something I can improve on, rather than a criticism that's not giving me any really feedback. It's just someone thought of in the spur of the moment and actually quite angry about the fact that I didn't think about it first. And I think that's what kind of I don't like about academia.
Yeah. So moving on to the next questions.
What it is, like, academia is such a hard place. Honestly, it is brutal. It's, if you think about it, you're constantly fighting for things. It's like scholarships, funding. You're fighting for a place in the article. You're trying to publish in the best journals, and it's like people actually forget the fact that we're doing it to progress the humanity. We're not actually doing it to progress ourselves. We're doing it to progress the humanity and the knowledge that humans do have about certain subjects. And I think a lot of people forget about that, especially in academia.
But that's where your research comes in, with the personality types.
Exactly.
So the next question is, should PhD students be judged by the number of journal articles that they publish successfully?
Oh God, no, by any stretch, no. Because I think it actually brings me to my favorite subject. Mm-hmm. I am dyslexic, and it's something kind of resonates with me that a lot of people struggle to write. And I completely understand that. I struggled for years. Mm-hmm. I found it so difficult progressing in academic world because I'm dyslexic. Mm-hmm. And I think having published journal articles now and kind of developed that, so just a skeleton of an article, and knowing what needs to be filled in and know what needs to be kind of sent out, and kind of adjusting it to different journals differently, it helped me a lot. But in the beginning, you should never be judged by how many articles you publish. You might come into PhD with the most incredible idea, but if you judge by how many articles you published beforehand, you might not even get to do a PhD. So I don't think having articles when you're still a student. This is what I think a lot of people forget. You're still a student. I'm still learning. To this day, I am still learning. Mm-hmm. And I think unless after you graduate, and unless you become like an expert in a specific subject, you're still learning. You learn every day. And I think having journal articles is fantastic. I think it's great, but it should not be something that you look at when you're applying for PhD. I think the research subject and the passion behind the research is what you're looking for.
I respect what you said, because we're all unique, and so different in terms of how we learn. And I believe there was a guest, her research is not out yet, who was really pushing for people with ADHD, because they have challenges as well in terms of how they receive and how they interact and how they write as well. And that can limit how many articles they can publish. Sometimes they can publish loads, sometimes they can't publish loads. So it's quite important to your point there when it comes to dyslexia, because the world thinks all of us, we're all the same. However, we have challenges. Even though we're still doing our PhD or a postdoc, we still have those challenges. Whether you're a professor, if you've got dyslexia, you know, it's still the same challenge. So having that respect, I guess, I don't know how one can put it, but it's required and it's necessary. So thank you very much.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's simply understanding that not everyone thinks exactly the same as you do. I, for example, struggle a lot to read, not in the sense that I can't read, in the sense that I struggle to retain the information that I read. So there's a lot of time I would be reading the same thing, and I need to do that. And then I need to talk it over with someone in order for it to sink into my head. That's why a lot of things like writing a 92,000 word thesis, which I have actually right here, it's like huge.
Yes.
Honestly, it takes a long time. It doesn't take a month. Oh, I've watched loads of YouTube videos of how to write a thesis in a month, and I'm like, damn, I would never be able to do that.
I've seen those videos too, and I sit there going, this could be depression. Eating my crisps, I'm like, this is not helping my mental health. But
no, right? Honestly, it's like
not that we're bashing you, but some people can do it, but we
please, my hat's off to those people. Please go ahead. If you can write a thesis and pass your viva in a month, what the hell? Like, teach me, teach everyone. But honestly, I can't do it. And I think majority of the people, not majority, but quite a lot of people are more like me rather than a person who writes a thesis in a month. And I think that's what we need to get out there. You need to understand other people. And I think you need to understand that learning difficulties, learning disabilities are not something to be afraid of. It's something to embrace and learn and how to live with it. And I think that's what's important. But we're getting there, isn't it? Like, the conversation about neurodiversity is a lot more out there now than it was 5 years ago, let's say. Which is nice to see.
No, which is really good. The person what I spoke to a few days back, who be live on phdhardtalk, really is an advocate for neurodiversity in research. So I believe and I think there'll be so much that will be implemented to do better and for us to get the awareness out there. I guess the final question is, do you think phdhardtalk is benefiting researchers and also the communities and the universities out there? What do you think? Noma, call it a day, yeah? That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Bye. No, of course not. I think getting things out there about research from different perspectives, from different students, from different fields, and even from professors and doctors, I think it is vital. People need to understand what PhD is. I think we all have some sort of preconception about PhD, and we romanticize that academic world and doing our research. Actually, it takes a huge toll on you. It takes huge toll on your mental health. Even like back in 2021, when I was actually writing my thesis over the summer, honestly, I struggled so badly, and I never realized I would, because before that, I had a fly for my PhD. I loved it. And then when it came to writing my thesis with a full-time job, I thought, oh my God, I can understand why people drop out last minute. I completely understand them, because I was so close. If not my support system, I don't know what would have happened in that sense. So I think people need to understand what PhDs actually is, how much work is put into every research that we do. And it is in the definition to an extent, it is an original contribution to knowledge, and making that tiny bit of progress for humanity is something that I hold on to every single day throughout the past 4 years, because that keeps me going in my research. And I think that's what a lot of people need to know. But and I think what you guys do is absolutely amazing, because I think you're getting people's research out there for one, and I think you're trying to educate people on what actually academic world and PhD is, and it is very important to understand that.
No, thank you very much. I've got one more question. Just one more, and then I think I'm done. And I think you're tired as well. Self-fund or get a scholarship, because you said you work a full-time job and you're doing your research. What are your thoughts on that? Because everybody that's come on has different answers, but I think they're quite similar depending on background.
I feel that you find that answer probably very different. I'm self-funded. for my PhD. And the reason why I'm self-funded for my PhD is because I found the scholarship application very draining. And I found them, I wouldn't say too competitive, because I like a healthy competition, but I don't think they are a healthy competition. I think they're more designed to try and fit people in the best possible categories for the time being. So if your research fits into the category that the news and the government and organization are interested in at the moment, you're more likely to get a scholarship, which is fine by me, but I don't think it's a healthy competition. I think healthy competition is genuinely whatever research you do should be put on an equal plate. And I think that's what's important. But obviously not everyone would agree with me. So I completely understand, but I am self-funded, and I did find it less daunting being self-funded than I would have if I had a scholarship, I think. But obviously everyone is different. I loved having a full-time job, especially in my last year of my PhD. I worked for Office of National Statistics.
Okay.
And it kind of actually helped me with my research as well, because it developed some sort of quantitative analysis techniques, which I have never developed before. So I found it really interesting. And now it helped me got the job which I do have now. So I don't know, I found self-funding taking away the pressure from actual scholarship application and focusing on my research. But some people see it completely differently. So I think it just depends from person to person. It depends what research they're doing.
Yeah, I like your response, because I think, you know, when I get these questions, there's not one answer that fits all, and it's dependent on situation. And it's great for you to voice your opinion, to say this is the reason why, and me you know, being in work has assisted me to do A, B, C, D, you know, to mention what the benefits are. It's not smooth and fluffy all the time, but it's great for somebody to share, because you've answered the question that was asked by probably 5 people. And now I'm, you know, my notepad is heavy. I get a lot of questions, and I don't want it to be me just answering. I want everybody that comes on the platform to have their say. So therefore they can pick and choose the best advice that works for their situation. So thank you so much. I know I said I was done, but then I've asked another question. So thank you again. So remember, hashtag projectdisseminationtotheworld. Subscribe, like, and share. And please, if you do want to get in contact, details are at the bottom. LinkedIn, a profile will be shared on there. Conferences that you'll be attending will be shared on there. And if you want to follow on IG, socials, we'll see you on our socials. So thank you again.
Elevated, now it's my time to shine. Yeah, let's go.